She spent 23 years being told she was worthless, broken, unmarriageable. And now, her own father was handing her over to a slave like she was damaged goods nobody wanted. What he did not know, what would shatter his entire world when he finally discovered the truth, was that the man he had dismissed as nothing was the most feared creature in existence. The Vampire King. The one who never forgives. The one who had been waiting 20 years for this exact moment. And Rufus, the fool, had just handed him the perfect weapon for his revenge. The puppy whimpered in her arms as Isolde's father gripped her shoulder too tightly, his fingers digging into the fabric of her worn dress. He would not even look at her face when he said, "You will go with him, and you will be grateful someone was willing to take you at all." Isolde had learned to make herself small. It was easier that way, easier than watching the disappointment flicker across her father's face every time he remembered she existed. Her left leg had been twisted since birth, the foot turning inward in a way that made walking painful and running impossible. In a world that valued strength and beauty, she had been born with neither. At 23, she had long stopped hoping for a different life. She sat now in the corner of her father's estate library, the smallest room in a house that had once been grand but was now crumbling at the edges. Her only companion was Pip, a scruffy little terrier with one ear that flopped forward and eyes too large for his face. She had found him half-drowned in a ditch 2 years ago, and her father had permitted her to keep him only because the creature is as pathetic as you are, a fitting match. Isolde ran her fingers through Pip's fur and stared out the window at the gardens she was no longer allowed to walk through. Guests would be arriving soon, her father had said. Potential business partners. She was to stay hidden, as always. An embarrassment, she whispered to Pip, repeating the word her father had used that morning. "That's what I am." Pip licked her hand, and she smiled despite the heaviness in her chest. What Isolde did not know was that in the servants' quarters below, a man who was not a man at all was preparing to change her life forever. His name was Kade, though the staff knew him only as the new laborer her father had hired 3 months ago. He worked without complaint, hauling stone and mending fences, his head bowed and his clothes dirty. The other servants pitied him. Rufus, Isolde's father, barely acknowledged his existence. But when Kade was alone, when the sun set and the estate grew quiet, his eyes glowed amber in the darkness, and the air around him hummed with a power older than the stones beneath his feet. He was the Vampire King. The immortal ruler of the night. The one whose name was whispered in fear across 100 kingdoms. And he had been watching Rufus for a very, very long time. Kade stood now in the dim basement room they had given him, his shirt hanging loose, his expression unreadable. On the table beside him lay a contract, signed in Rufus's own hand. A debt 20 years overdue. A betrayal that had cost Kade someone he loved. Rufus had once been a merchant in a southern city, a man who had sold information to vampire hunters in exchange for gold. One of those hunters had killed Kade's younger sister, barely a century old, burning her alive while she slept. Kade had spent 2 decades finding every man responsible. Rufus was the last. But Kade did not believe in quick deaths. He believed in poetic justice. In taking from a man the thing he valued most and making him watch as it slipped through his fingers. He had expected Rufus to value his wealth, his reputation, perhaps his legacy. He had not expected Isolde. The girl with the twisted leg and the sad eyes who sat alone in the library every day, reading to a dog that loved her. The girl her father spoke of with contempt. The girl Rufus was now, in his desperation to rid himself of burden, offering to Kade. Kade tilted his head, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just realized the hunt would be far more interesting than anticipated. Well then, he murmured to the darkness. "Let us see what dear Rufus has handed me." Upstairs, Isolde heard her father's heavy footsteps approaching. Pip growled low in his throat, and she shushed him gently, her heart already sinking. The door opened. Rufus did not greet her. He simply said, "Come. Now." She rose carefully, her leg aching as it always did, and followed him down the hall, Pip trotting anxiously at her heels. Her father led her to the drawing room, where a man stood with his back to them, gazing out the window. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and even in the rough clothing of a laborer, he carried himself with a strange grace. When he turned, Isolde's breath caught. His face was beautiful in a way that seemed almost dangerous. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, dark hair that fell just slightly too long. But it was his eyes that held her. They were dark, endless, and when they met hers, she felt as though he could see every secret she had ever kept. Rufus cleared his throat. "This is the man I told you about. He has agreed to take you into his household. You will serve him as he sees fit." Isolde blinked. "I don't understand." "You are a burden I can no longer afford," Rufus said flatly. "He has offered to take you off my hands. You should be grateful." The words landed like stones in her chest. She looked at the stranger, expecting to see disgust or pity. Instead, she saw something that looked almost like fury, but it was not directed at her. Kade stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate, and the air in the room seemed to shift. He did not look at Rufus. He looked only at Isolde. "Your father and I have made an arrangement," Kade said, and his voice was low, smooth, with an accent she could not place. "You and your companion will come with me. You will want for nothing. And you will never be called a burden again." Isolde's hands trembled. "I don't even know who you are." Kade's smile was sharp, dangerous, and absolutely captivating. "No," he said softly. "You don't. But you will." He turned then to Rufus, and though his expression remained pleasant, there was something in his eyes that made the older man take a step back. "We have an accord, do we not, Rufus?" Kade asked, his tone light, almost playful. But there was an edge beneath it, like a blade hidden in silk. Rufus nodded quickly. "Yes. Yes, take her. Today. Now, if you wish." "Oh, I do wish," Kade said. He looked back at Isolde, and his voice softened just slightly. "Gather whatever you hold dear. We leave within the hour." Isolde stood frozen, her mind spinning. Pip pressed against her leg, whining. "Go," Rufus said harshly. "Do not make this harder than it needs to be." And so she went, limping back to her small room, tears burning in her eyes, Pip following close behind. She owned so little. A few dresses, a book her mother had given her before she died, a wooden carving of a bird she had made herself. As she packed, she wondered if this stranger would be cruel. If he would work her until she collapsed. If he would cast her out when he realized how useless she truly was. She did not know that downstairs, Kade was making a very different promise. "You have given me something precious today, Rufus," Kade said quietly, his smile gone. "And you do not even know it. But you will. When you realize what you have lost, when you come begging to see her, I will remind you of this moment. I will remind you that you called her a burden. And I will make certain you spend the rest of your miserable life regretting it." Rufus laughed nervously. "She is a cripple. What could you possibly want with her?" Kade's eyes flashed amber, just for a moment, and Rufus froze. "That," Kade said softly, "is no longer your concern. You have been watching for a while now, and I see you. I know you are hooked. I know you want to know what Kade does next, how Isolde discovers the truth, and how her father pays for what he has done. If you are truly invested, if you want to see this through, do not just sit there in silence. Hit that subscribe button. Join the fastest growing vampire love stories community. We are building something special here, and I want you to be part of it. Also, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching this from? I would absolutely love to know where this story is reaching. Now, let me ask you this. If you were sold, and you just discovered your father gave you away to a stranger, would you leave without a fight, or would you be curious enough to see what happens next? The carriage Kade had waiting was far too elegant for a slave to own. Isolde noticed but said nothing. She sat across from him, Pip trembling on her lap, her small bundle of belongings beside her. The silence stretched between them like a wire-pulled taut. Kade watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Not with fear exactly, but with something else, something she had no name for. "You are afraid," he said finally. It was not a question. "Wouldn't you be?" Isolde replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. His lips curved into a smile, and for a moment, she forgot to breathe. "I have not been afraid in a very long time. But yes, I suppose in your position, I might be." "What do you want with me?" she asked. "My father said you needed a servant, but you do not look at me the way one looks at a servant." Kade leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and the space between them seemed to shrink. "How do I look at you, then?" "Like I am a puzzle you are trying to solve." He laughed, a low, rich sound that filled the carriage. "Clever. Your father is a fool for not seeing it. My father sees only what is broken. Then he's blind as well as foolish." The carriage hit a bump, and Isolde winced as her leg twisted painfully. Before she could even register the movement, Kade was beside her, his hand steadying her with a gentleness that shocked her. "Careful," he murmured. His hands were cool, impossibly strong, and when his fingers brushed her arm, she felt a strange current run through her, like lightning beneath her skin. She looked up at him, and their faces were inches apart. His eyes, dark and fathomless, held hers, and for a moment the world outside the carriage ceased to exist. "Who are you really?" she whispered. Kade's smile turned sharp, dangerous, breathtaking. "Someone your father should have recognized. Someone he will wish he had never crossed. But for you, Isolde?" His voice dropped lower, intimate, deliberate. "For you, I will be whatever you need me to be." The way he said her name, as though it were something sacred, something worthy of reverence, made her chest tighten. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her like she mattered. "You know my name," she said softly. "But I do not know yours." "Kade," he said, and then, with a glint of mischief in his eyes, he added, "though some call me other things." "Your Majesty." "My lord." "The Immortal Terror." Depends on who is doing the asking and how much they value their life. Isolde's eyes widened. "You are joking." "Am I?" And then the carriage lurched to a sudden stop. Pip barked sharply. Outside, there were shouts, the sound of horses whinnying in panic. Kade's expression shifted in an instant, the playfulness vanishing, replaced by something cold and lethal. "Stay here," he commanded, and before Isolde could respond, he was out of the carriage, moving with a speed that should not have been possible. She peered through the window, her heart hammering. 6 men on horseback surrounded the carriage, armed with swords and crossbows. Bandits, from the look of them. Their leader, a scarred man with a cruel grin, pointed his blade at Kade. "Nice carriage for a working man. Hand over your coin and the girl, and we might let you live." Kade stood perfectly still, his hands loose at his sides. And then he smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of an apex predator who had just been given permission to hunt. "Gentlemen," Kade said, his voice carrying easily over the sound of restless horses. "I am going to give you one chance. One. Leave now, and I will allow you to keep your lives. Stay, and I promise you, your deaths will be the stories mothers tell their children to keep them awake at night." The bandits laughed. The leader spat on the ground. Big words for a man alone. Kade tilted his head, and his eyes began to glow. Amber. Bright. Inhuman. "Alone?" he said softly. "Oh, I am never alone. I am the thing that haunts your alone." And then he moved. Isolde could barely track it. One moment he was standing still, the next he was in the center of the group, moving like smoke and shadow. The first bandit's sword shattered in his hand. The second man was thrown from his horse with a single blow. The third screamed as Kade caught his wrist and twisted, the sound of breaking bone sharp in the evening air. It was not a fight. It was a demonstration. Within seconds, all 6 men were on the ground, groaning, bleeding, terrified. Kade stood over them, not even breathing hard, his eyes still glowing in the dim light. "Run," he said quietly. "And pray I never see your faces again." They ran, stumbling over each other in their panic, leaving their weapons and horses behind. Kade turned back to the carriage, and as he walked, the glow faded from his eyes. By the time he opened the door, he looked almost human again. Almost. Isolde stared at him, her mouth open, Pip silent in her arms. "You," she breathed. "You are not human." Kade climbed back into the carriage and sat across from her, smoothing his shirt as though he had not just destroyed 6 armed men in the span of a heartbeat. "No," he said simply. "I am not." "What are you?" He met her eyes, and there was no deception in his gaze, no cruelty. Only honesty. "I am a vampire, Isolde. And not just any vampire. I am their king." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and impossible. Isolde's grip on Pip tightened, her mind racing. Vampires. She had heard the stories, the warnings whispered by firelight. Bloodthirsty monsters. Killers in the dark. Creatures without souls. But the man sitting across from her, the one who had just saved her from bandits, the one who had spoken her name like it was something precious, did not look like a monster. He looked patient. Waiting. "You are going to kill me," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Kade's expression softened. "If I wanted you dead, Isolde, you would not have made it into this carriage." "No. I have no intention of harming you. Quite the opposite, actually." "Then why? Why would the king of vampires want anything to do with me? I am nobody. I am broken. I am..." "Enough," Kade said sharply, and the command in his voice stopped her cold. "I will not hear you repeat the lies your father carved into you. You are not broken. You are not nobody. And if you say such things again, I will be very cross." Isolde blinked, stunned. "You do not even know me." "I know enough. I know you have been treated as less than you are for your entire life. I know your father is a coward who could not see your worth if it were written across the sky. And I know that you, despite everything, have remained kind. You saved a dying dog. You read to him every night. You speak gently even when the world has been cruel to you. That is not nothing, Isolde. That is everything." She felt tears prick her eyes and looked away quickly, ashamed. "Why do you care?" Kade leaned back, his gaze never leaving her. "Because your father wronged me long ago. He sold information that led to the death of someone I loved. I have spent 20 years making those responsible pay for it. He is the last. And I intended to destroy everything he valued." Isolde's blood ran cold. "So this is revenge. I am just a tool for you. You were supposed to be, Kade admitted, and the honesty in his voice was almost worse than a lie. But then I watched you. For weeks, I lived in that house, invisible to your father, but I saw you. The way you hid yourself away. The way you flinched when he raised his voice. The way you held that ridiculous little dog and whispered that you were sorry for being alive. His voice dropped, and there was an edge of something raw beneath it. And I realized your father does not value you at all. Which means taking you does not hurt him the way I wanted. But leaving you there, letting you waste away in that miserable house, believing you were worthless? That, I could not abide. Isolde's breath hitched. So you took me out of pity? No, Kade said firmly. I took you because you deserved better. Pity is for the weak. You are not weak, Isolde. You are surviving in a world that has tried to crush you, and you are still standing. That is strength. She wanted to believe him. Desperately. But a lifetime of her father's voice in her head made it hard to accept that anyone, let alone a vampire king, could see her as anything other than damaged. I do not understand you, she said quietly. You will, Kade replied. In time. The carriage began to move again, and Isolde sat in silence, her mind spinning. Every instinct told her to be afraid. He was a vampire. A killer. A creature of darkness. But when she looked at him, all she saw was the man who had spoken her name with reverence, who had defended her worth when no one else ever had. She did not know what to do with that. So she did the only thing she could. She held Pip close, stared out the window, and tried very hard not to think about the way her heart had raced when Kade's hands had steadied her. The estate Kade brought her to was nothing like her father's crumbling house. It was a sprawling manor carved from dark stone, surrounded by forests that seemed to whisper secrets. Porches lined the long driveway, and as the carriage pulled up, servants appeared, silent and efficient. They did not look at Isolde with pity or disgust. They simply bowed and waited for Kade's instructions. Prepare the east wing, Kade said as he stepped down. The room with the garden view. And bring food, something warm. She has had a long journey. He turned and offered Isolde his hand. She hesitated, then took it, letting him help her down. Her leg buckled slightly, and again, his hands were there, steadying her with that same impossible gentleness. I can walk, she said, more defensively than she intended. I know, Kade replied. But you do not have to prove anything to me. A woman appeared at the door, older, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense air. My lord, she said, bowing her head. Welcome back. Griselda, this is Isolde. She is to be treated as an honored guest. See that she has everything she needs. Griselda's eyes flicked to Isolde, assessing, and then she nodded. Of course, my lord. This way, miss. Isolde glanced back at Kade, uncertain. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. Go. Rest. I will check on you later. She followed Griselda through halls lined with paintings and tapestries, up a grand staircase, and into a room that took her breath away. It was larger than the entire library back home. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in deep blue fabric. A fireplace crackled with warmth. And beyond the wide windows, she could see a garden bathed in moonlight. The master does not usually bring guests, Griselda said as she lit more candles. You must be important. I am nobody, Isolde said automatically. Griselda snorted. If you were nobody, you would not be in this room. Now, sit. Let me take a look at that leg. It is fine. Sit, Griselda repeated, and there was a motherly firmness in her tone that Isolde could not resist. She sat, and Griselda examined her leg with practiced hands, tutaying softly. You have been walking on this without proper support for too long. I will have a brace made. And salves for the pain. The master will want you comfortable. Why does he care? Isolde asked, the question slipping out before she could stop it. Griselda paused, then smiled faintly. I have served Lord Kade for 60 years. I have seen him tear apart armies and kings. I have seen him ruthless, cold, unforgiving. But I have also seen him protect those he deems worthy. If he brought you here, it is because he sees something in you. Do not question it. Just accept it. Before Isolde could respond, there was a knock at the door. A servant entered with a tray of food, bread, cheese, roasted meat, fruit, and a pot of tea that smelled of honey and herbs. Isolde's stomach growled. She had not eaten since morning. Eat, Griselda said. I will return in the morning. And then she was alone. She fed Pip first, breaking off pieces of meat and watching him devour them happily. Then she ate, slowly, savoring every bite. When she finished, she moved to the window and looked out at the garden. It was beautiful, wild, and carefully tended all at once. Behind her, the door opened. She turned, expecting Griselda. It was Kade. He had changed his clothes, now dressed in black, his hair still damp as though he had bathed. He looked every inch the king he claimed to be. You did not have to come, Isolde said. I wanted to make sure you were settled. He stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over her. Griselda is taking care of you? Yes. She is kind. She is practical. But yes, she is kind when she chooses to be. He moved to the window and stood beside her, looking out at the garden. Do you like it? It is beautiful. It was my sister's favorite place, Kade said quietly. She would spend hours out there, talking to the flowers. She said they listened better than I did. Isolde looked at him, startled by the vulnerability in his voice. The sister your father's information helped kill? Yes. I am sorry. It was not your fault. No. But I am still sorry. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of shared grief settling between them. Why am I really here, Kade? Isolde asked softly. The truth. He turned to face her fully, and his eyes, those dark, endless eyes, held hers. Because I have spent centuries surrounded by people who want something from me. Power. Protection. Favor. But you do not even know what to ask for. And that, Isolde, is rarer than you know. You are here because I want you to be. And because I think, perhaps, you might want to be here too. Even if you do not realize it yet. Her heart hammered in her chest. You are wrong. I do not belong in a place like this. Then we will make it a place where you do, Kade said simply. And with that, he turned and left, closing the door quietly behind him. Isolde stood frozen, Pip curling up on the bed behind her, and for the first time in her life, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was not as unwanted as she had always believed. 3 days passed like a dream Isolde was afraid to wake from. Kade gave her space, but his presence was always felt. She would find books on her nightstand that she had mentioned wanting to read. A brace for her leg appeared, crafted from soft leather and light metal, that made walking almost painless for the first time in years. Pip had his own cushion by the fire and more scraps than he knew what to do with. And every evening, Kade would come to her room, knock politely, and ask if she would join him for dinner. She always said yes. On the 4th night, as they sat across from each other in a dining room lit by candlelight, Isolde finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind. You said my father sold information that got your sister killed. What did he tell them? Kade's fork paused halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully, his expression unreadable. Are you certain you want to know? Yes. He leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass. 20 years ago, your father was a merchant in the southern port city of Ashmere. He dealt in rare goods, information, secrets. He sold to anyone who would pay. Vampire hunters came to him, looking for nests, locations, weaknesses. He gave them everything they wanted. Kade's voice remained calm, but Isolde could hear the ice beneath it. One of the things he sold them was the location of a safe house where my sister, Mirabelle, was staying. She was young by our standards, barely 100 years old. She still believed the world could be kind. She was visiting the coast because she loved the sea. His jaw tightened. They came during the day while she slept. Doused the house in oil and set it ablaze. She never woke up. Isolde's hand flew to her mouth. Kade, I tracked down every single person involved, Kade continued, his voice soft and deadly. The hunters, the informants, the ones who funded them. It took me 2 decades, but I found them all. Some I killed quickly. Others, I made suffer. Your father was clever. He changed his name, moved inland, built a new life. But I am patient, Isolde. And I never forget. Tears burned in Isolde's eyes. He is a monster. Yes, Kade agreed. But he is your father. And I know that complicates things. He stopped being my father the day he gave me away like I was trash, Isolde said bitterly. Maybe he stopped long before that. I do not mourn the man he is. I mourn the man I needed him to be. Kade's expression softened. He reached across the table and, slowly, deliberately, placed his hand over hers. His skin was cool, but the gesture was warm. I understand that pain, he said quietly. More than you know. What happened to your parents? Isolde asked. A shadow crossed Kade's face. My father was a brutal man. He believed power was everything, that love made you weak. He tried to kill me when I refused to execute Mirabelle for showing mercy to a human child. I killed him instead. My mother watched and did nothing. She chose his cruelty over her own children. Isolde turned her hand over, lacing her fingers through his. Then we are both orphans of living parents. Kade looked down at their joined hands, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps. Or recognition. Yes, he said. I suppose we are. They sat like that for a long moment, the silence no longer uncomfortable but strangely intimate. I brought you something, Kade said finally, releasing her hand and reaching into his jacket. He pulled out a folded piece of parchment and slid it across the table. Isolde opened it carefully. It was a deed. To her father's estate. Her eyes widened. I do not understand. Your father is drowning in debt, Kade explained. Has been for years. I have been buying up his creditors, piece by piece. As of yesterday, I own everything he has. The house, the land, the business. All of it. Isolde stared at him. You are going to destroy him. I am going to give him a choice, Kade corrected. He can sign everything over to you, his only heir, and walk away with his life and a small stipend. Or he can refuse, and I will take it all anyway and leave him with nothing but the memory of what he lost. Why would you give it to me? Isolde whispered. Kade's smile was sharp, wicked, and absolutely devastating. Because the moment he realizes that his crippled, unmarriageable daughter now owns everything he spent his life building, the moment he understands that you are worth more than he ever was, that will hurt him more than any death I could give him. And you, Isolde, will have the power to decide whether he ever sees a single coin of it. Isolde's breath caught. It was cruel. It was brilliant. It was justice. You are terrifying, she said. I know. Kade's grin widened. But am I wrong? She looked down at the deed, her father's legacy, now hers. No, she admitted. You are not wrong. Good. Then it is settled. Tomorrow, we will pay your father a visit. And you will see what it feels like to be the one with the power. That night, Isolde could not sleep. She stood in the garden, Pip sniffing around the flower beds, her mind racing. Tomorrow, she would face her father. Tomorrow, everything would change. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Kade approaching, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. I thought you might need this, he said, offering her one. She took it gratefully. Do you ever sleep? Not often. One of the perks of being a vampire. More time to brood dramatically and plot revenge. Despite herself, Isolde laughed. You are not at all what I expected. What did you expect? Cape, fangs, maniacal laughter? Something like that. Kade sat on the stone bench near the fountain and patted the space beside him. Isolde hesitated, then sat, careful to keep a small distance between them. I wore a cape once, Kade said thoughtfully. 15th century. It was very fashionable. But then I got it caught in a door during a dramatic exit, and I decided they were more trouble than they worth. Isolde laughed again, the sound surprising her. You are ridiculous. I am multifaceted, Kade corrected with mock indignation. I contain multitudes. Terror and charm, vengeance and wit. It is exhausting, honestly. She shook her head, smiling despite everything. How do you do that? Do what? Make me forget, even for a moment, how complicated everything is. Kade's expression grew serious. Because you deserve moments where you are not carrying the weight of other people's cruelty. You deserve to laugh, Isolde. You deserve to feel light. Her smile faded, replaced by something deeper, more vulnerable. I have not felt light in a very long time. Then stay, Kade said softly. Stay here, where no one will make you feel small. Stay and let me show you what it is like to be seen. Why do you care so much? Isolde asked, the question barely a whisper. You could have your revenge without any of this. Without me. Kade was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the stars above. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw in a way she had never heard. Because when I watched you in that house, sitting alone with your dog, reading by candlelight, I saw someone who had been told she was worthless so many times she started to believe it. And I know what that feels like. My father told me love was weakness. That caring made you vulnerable. I believed him for a long time. I became exactly what he wanted. Cold. Ruthless. Unfeeling. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were bright with something that looked almost like pain. But Mirabelle never stopped loving me. Never stopped believing I could be more than our father's weapon. And when she died, I realized she was right. Love is not weakness. It is the only thing that makes this endless existence bearable. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You remind me of her. Not in appearance, but in spirit. You have been broken down and beaten, and yet you still have kindness in you. You still have hope. And I will be damned twice over before I let the world take that from you. Isolde's eyes filled with tears. I am not strong like you think I am. You are stronger, Kade said firmly. I have had centuries and power beyond measure. You have had nothing but pain and rejection, and you are still here. Still fighting. That is true strength. A tear slipped down her cheek, and before she could wipe it away, Kade did, his thumb gentle against her skin. Stay, he said again. Not as a tool for revenge. Not as a guest. Stay because you want to. Stay because here, you are valued. You are seen. You are cherished. The word cherished hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Isolde's voice shook when she spoke. I do not know how. Then let me teach you, Kade whispered. And there, in the moonlit garden, with Pip curled at their feet and the world quiet around them, Isolde let herself believe, just for a moment, that maybe she could be wanted after all. Kade stood and offered his hand. Come. There is something I want to show you. She took his hand, and he led her through the garden to a small greenhouse she had not noticed before. Inside, the air was warm and fragrant with flowers that bloomed even in the darkness. Mirabelle planted these, Kade said softly. Moonflowers. They only bloom at night. She said they were like us. Beautiful in the darkness. Isolde reached out to touch one of the pale, luminous petals. They are extraordinary. So are you, Kade said. She turned to him, and found him watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter. Kade. You do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to hear it. You are extraordinary, Isolde. And tomorrow, when we face your father, I will make certain he knows it too. What do you think Isolde's father will do when he sees her again, now that she holds all the power? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The carriage ride back to her father's estate felt like traveling through a nightmare. Isolde's hands trembled despite the brace that made walking easier, despite Kade's steady presence beside her, despite Pip's warm weight in her lap. You do not have to do this, Kade said quietly. I can handle this alone. No, Isolde said, her voice firmer than she felt. I need to see his face. I need him to see me. Kade's expression filled with something that looked like pride. Then I will be right beside you. When they arrived, the estate looked shabbier than Isolde remembered, as though even the building itself knew its time was ending. Kade helped her down from the carriage, and together they walked to the door. A servant Isolde recognized, old Thomas, opened it. His eyes widened when he saw her. Miss Isolde. We thought, your father said. Where is he? Isolde asked. In his study, miss, but... Kade brushed past him with the easy authority of someone who owned the very air he breathed, and Isolde followed, her heart pounding. Her father looked up from his desk as they entered, irritation flashing across his face. What is the meaning of this? I told you to take her in. He stopped abruptly as Kade closed the door behind them with a soft, deliberate click. Hello, Rufus, Kade said pleasantly. We need to have a conversation. Rufus's eyes narrowed. I gave you what you wanted. Our business is concluded. Oh, our business is far from concluded, Kade replied, his voice light but edged with danger. You see, I have not been entirely honest with you about who I am. I do not care who you are, Rufus snapped. You are no one. A laborer I hired, nothing more. Kade's smile was slow and razor-sharp. Actually, I am Kade Theron. Perhaps you have heard the name? The Vampire King? The Immortal Terror? The one whose sister you helped murder 20 years ago? The color drained from Rufus's face. He stumbled backward, knocking over his chair. No. That is not, you cannot be. But I am, Kade said softly, and his eyes began to glow that eerie amber. And I have been waiting a very long time for this moment. Rufus's gaze darted to Isolde, and for the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes. What have you done? Kade laughed. I have done nothing. Yet. You, however, have made a grave error. You gave me your daughter, thinking her worthless. Thinking she was a burden you could discard. But Isolde is worth more than you could possibly comprehend. He placed a leather folder on the desk. These are your debts. Every single one. I own them all. Which means I own you, Rufus. Everything you have built, everything you possess, it all belongs to me now. Rufus's hands shook as he opened the folder. His face went from pale to ashen. You cannot, this is not legal. It is perfectly legal, Kade said. I have the best lawyers money and immortality can buy. You have two choices. Sign everything over to Isolde, your legal heir, and I will allow you to walk away with a small income to live out your miserable existence. Or refuse, and I will take it all anyway, and you will have nothing. Not even your pride. Rufus turned to Isolde, and she saw something ugly twist his features. You planned this. You ungrateful, worthless. Finish that sentence, Kade interrupted, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, and you will not leave this room alive. But the damage was done. Rufus sneered at Isolde, all pretense of civility gone. You think you have won? You think this cripple, this embarrassment, this mistake is worth anything? I should have left you in the streets when you were born. You have been nothing but a curse on this family. Each word landed like a physical blow. Isolde felt herself shrinking, felt the old familiar shame rising up to choke her. And then Kade moved. One moment he was across the room, the next he had Rufus by the throat, lifted off the ground, his eyes blazing with fury. You dare, Kade snarled, and his voice resonated with a power that shook the walls. You dare speak to her that way in my presence? Rufus gasped for air, clawing at Kade's hand uselessly. Kade, Isolde whispered. Please. For a moment, she thought he would not listen. His grip tightened, and Rufus's face began to turn purple. Kade, she said again, louder. He is not worth it. Please. Slowly, Kade lowered Rufus back to the ground and released him. The older man collapsed, gasping and coughing. Kade turned to Isolde, and the fury in his eyes softened when he saw her face. Are you all right? She was not. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her whole body shook. But she nodded anyway. I just want to leave. Sign the papers, Kade said to Rufus without looking at him. Now. Rufus, still gasping, scrawled his signature across the documents with shaking hands. Kade gathered them up, took Isolde's arm gently, and led her toward the door. But Rufus, even in defeat, could not help himself. She will never be anything, he called after them, his voice hoarse. She is broken. Damaged. No king, no vampire, no one will ever truly want her. Isolde stopped. The words cut deeper than any blade. Kade turned slowly, and his expression was colder than death itself. You are right about one thing, Rufus. She will never be what you wanted. She will be so much more. And every day you continue to breathe, you will know that the daughter you called worthless is worth more than you ever were. You will live with that knowledge. And it will destroy you slowly, piece by piece, until there is nothing left but regret. He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow still carried through the room. And if I ever hear that you have spoken her name, if I ever learn that you have even thought of her, I will come back. And what I do to you will make my previous acts of revenge look like mercy. Do you understand me? Rufus said nothing, his face a mask of impotent rage and terror. Good, Kade said. And then, louder, to the house itself, this estate now belongs to Isolde. Anyone who wishes to remain employed will answer to her steward, who will arrive tomorrow. Rufus has 1 hour to pack his belongings and leave. Anyone who assists him beyond that will answer to me." And with that, Kade guided Isolde out of the house, into the carriage, and away from the only home she had ever known. She cried the entire journey back, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. Kade held her, saying nothing, just letting her purge the poison her father had spent a lifetime pouring into her soul. But when they arrived back at the manor, when Kade tried to help her out of the carriage, she pulled away. "Isolde." "He was right," she said, her voice hollow. "I am broken. I am damaged. You will grow tired of this, of me, and I will be alone again. It would be easier if you just sent me away now." Kade's face fell. "You do not mean that." "How do you know what I mean?" Isolde cried. "You have known me for days. You do not know me. You do not know what it is like to live in this body, with this pain, with everyone looking at you and seeing something less than whole." "You are right," Kade said quietly. "I do not know what that is like. But I know what it is like to be seen as a monster. To be feared and hated for what you are. And I know what it is like to believe you are unworthy of love. So do not tell me I do not understand pain, Isolde. I have centuries of it." She looked away, tears still streaming down her face. "I cannot do this. I cannot let myself hope that you mean all the things you have said, because when you inevitably realize I am not worth the effort, it will break me. And I have nothing left to break." "Then let me carry the pieces," Kade said desperately. "Let me prove to you that I am not him. That I will not leave. That you are worth every effort, every moment, every—" "Stop," Isolde whispered. "Just stop. I need to be alone." She climbed out of the carriage without his help, limping toward the manor, Pip following at her heels. Kade stood in the darkness, watching her go, and for the first time in centuries, the vampire king felt utterly powerless. Isolde did not leave her room for 3 days. Griselda brought food that went mostly untouched. Pip stayed close, sensing her distress. And outside her door, though she did not know it, Kade stood guard every night, silent and watchful. On the 4th morning, Isolde woke to find a letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was elegant, precise. It read, "Isolde, I will not apologize for caring about you. I will not apologize for seeing your worth when others were too blind to recognize it. But I will apologize for pushing too hard, too fast. You have spent your entire life being told what you are, what you should be, how you should feel. I do not want to be another voice taking your choice away. So I am giving it back to you. Stay or go. Accept what I offer or refuse it. Whatever you decide, you will have your estate, your independence, and your freedom. No strings. No expectations. You owe me nothing. But know this. If you choose to stay, it will not be out of obligation or gratitude or fear. It will be because you want to. Because you believe, even just a little, that you deserve to be cherished. The choice is yours. It always has been. Kade." Isolde read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into her pocket. She spent the day in her room, thinking. About her father's words. About Kade's actions. About the life she had lived and the life that was now possible. Pip nudged her hand, and she scratched behind his ears absently. "What do you think?" she asked him. "Can I trust this? Can I trust him?" Pip licked her hand and wagged his tail. "You are biased," she said softly. "He gives you bacon." But as she sat there, watching the sunset through her window, she realized something. Her father had spent her entire life making her feel small, making her believe she was lucky to receive even scraps of affection. He had taught her that love was conditional, that she had to earn it, and that she would always fall short. But Kade had asked for nothing. He had given her freedom, power, choice. He had defended her, valued her, seen her. And when she had pushed him away, he had not punished her or withdrawn his care. He had simply stepped back and given her space. That was not control. That was respect. And maybe, just maybe, that was love. The realization settled over her like a blanket, warm and terrifying all at once. She rose, her leg aching only slightly thanks to the brace, and made her way downstairs. The manor was quiet, most of the staff retired for the evening. She found Griselda in the kitchen, kneading dough. "Where is he?" Isolde asked. Griselda looked up, flour dust in her hands. "The greenhouse. Where he always goes when he is troubled." Isolde nodded and turned to leave. "Miss Isolde," Griselda called. "He is a good man." "Well, not a man, but you understand my meaning. In all my years here, I have never seen him care for anyone the way he cares for you. Do not let your father's poison convince you otherwise." "I am trying not to," Isolde said quietly. She found Kade in the greenhouse, sitting among Mirabelle's moonflowers, staring at nothing. He looked up when she entered, surprise and something like hope flickering across his face before he carefully schooled his expression to neutral. "Isolde, I read your letter," she said. "And?" She moved closer, her heart pounding. "And I am terrified." Kade's expression softened. "Of me? Of this? Of believing that I could be wanted and then discovering I was wrong? Of letting myself hope?" "Hope is terrifying," Kade agreed quietly. "It is the most dangerous thing we can carry. Because it means we have something to lose." "Then why offer it to me?" Isolde asked. "Why not just let me go? It would be easier." Kade stood, moving toward her with that predatory grace that should have frightened her but somehow did not. "Because easy is not the same as right. Because you deserve someone willing to fight for you, even when you cannot fight for yourself. Because when I look at you, I do not see broken or damaged or less than. I see someone brave enough to survive a world that tried to crush her. I see someone kind enough to love a dying dog. I see someone strong enough to stand in front of her abuser and not crumble. And I see someone I would very much like to know for the next few centuries, if she will allow it." Isolde's breath caught. "Centuries? I am immortal, Isolde. I could make you immortal too, if you wanted. But that is a conversation for another day. Right now, I just need to know. Do you want to stay? Not because you have nowhere else to go. Not because you feel obligated. But because you want to." She looked up at him, at this impossible man who was not a man, this king who had knelt before her brokenness and called it strength. And she realized that her father had been wrong about so many things. But he had been wrong most of all about this. She was not unlovable. She had simply been loving the wrong people. "I want to stay," she whispered. Kade's eyes closed briefly, relief washing over his features. "You are certain?" "No," Isolde admitted. "I am terrified and uncertain and I still do not fully understand why you care. But I want to stay anyway. I want to learn what it feels like to be chosen." "Then stay," Kade said softly. "And let me spend however long it takes proving to you that you were always worth choosing." He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her face gently in his hands. "I am going to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you want me to kiss you?" Isolde's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. "Yes." "Are you sure? Because once I start, I am not certain I will want to stop." "Then do not stop," Isolde breathed. And Kade kissed her. It was soft at first, gentle, reverent, as though she were something precious that might break. But when she sighed against his mouth and her hands came up to grip his shirt, pulling him closer, the kiss deepened, became something urgent and real and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kade rested his forehead against hers. "I have lived for centuries," he murmured. "I have seen empires rise and fall. I have tasted every pleasure the world has to offer. And nothing has ever felt like this." Isolde laughed, the sound watery but genuine. "You are going to spoil me." "That is the idea," Kade said, grinning. "I am going to spoil you so thoroughly that you forget what it ever felt like to be treated as anything less than extraordinary." "I think," Isolde said slowly, "I would like that very much." 6 months later, Isolde stood in the gardens of her estate, the one that had once belonged to her father, watching his workers transformed it into something new. She had kept some of the staff who had been kind to her over the years, pensioned off the rest generously, and hired people who understood that this was no longer a house of shame but a home of second chances. She had turned the East Wing into a sanctuary for women and children who had nowhere else to go. The forgotten, the dismissed, the ones society had deemed worthless. They found refuge here, and purpose, and the space to heal. Kade had helped her design every aspect of it, but he had insisted it be hers. Her vision. Her legacy. "You are changing the world," he had told her. "I am just lucky enough to watch." Now, as the sun set and the first stars appeared, Isolde heard familiar footsteps behind her. She smiled before she even turned around. Kade wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "How are you feeling?" "Good," Isolde said, leaning back against him. "Tired, but good." "You have been working too hard," says the man who does not sleep. "I have an excuse. I am a creature of the night. You are human and need rest." Isolde turned in his arms, looping her hands behind his neck. "Then distract me." Kade's eyes gleamed. "That, my love, I can do." He kissed her deeply, and she sighed into it, still marveling that this was her life now. That she was loved. That she was chosen. When they broke apart, Kade reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "I have something for you." Isolde raised an eyebrow. "You gave me a present yesterday." "I give you presents every day. I am consistent like that." "Open it." Inside the box was a ring. Not a delicate, pretty thing, but a bold band of silver etched with intricate designs that seemed to move in the light. "It was Mirabelle's," Kade said softly. "She would have wanted you to have it. She always believed that family was not about blood, but about who you chose to stand beside. And I choose you, Isolde. Every day. For as long as you will have me." Tears filled Isolde's eyes. "Are you asking what I think you are asking?" "I am asking if you will marry me. If you will let me stand beside you, not as a king, not as a vampire, but as a man who loves you more than he thought possible. If you will build this life with me, and let me spend eternity proving that you were always, always enough." Isolde kissed him, tears streaming down her face, Pip barking excitedly at their feet. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Kade slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as though it had been waiting for her all along. In the distance, in a small rented room in the city, Rufus sat alone, staring at a letter that had arrived that morning. An invitation to Isolde's wedding. Not because she wanted him there, but because she wanted him to know. To see what she had become. To understand what he had lost. He crumpled the letter in his fist, rage and regret warring in his chest. But there was nothing he could do. No way to undo the choices he had made. His daughter, the one he had called worthless, was now richer than he had ever been, more loved than he had ever deserved, and more powerful than he could have imagined. And he would live with that knowledge every single day for the rest of his miserable life. Back in the garden, Isolde pulled away from Kade just enough to look up at him. "Do you think he will come? To the wedding?" "No," Kade said. "He is too much of a coward. But he will know. And that is enough. Is it terrible that I do not care whether he suffers?" Isolde asked quietly. "No," Kade said firmly. "It is human. You are allowed to stop caring about people who never cared about you." Isolde nodded, then smiled, wicked and bright. "Good. Because I have much more important things to think about. Like where we are going for our honeymoon." Kade laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Anywhere you want, my love. The world is yours." "Then I choose here," Isolde said. "With you. With Pip. With the people we are helping. This is where I want to be." Kade pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Then here is where we will stay." And there, in the garden where moonflowers bloomed and second chances grew, the girl who had been called broken discovered that she had been whole all along. She had just needed someone to see it. Someone who looked at her and saw not a burden, but a gift. Not a curse, but a blessing. Not an ending, but a beginning. And as Kade held her under the stars, Pip curled at their feet, Isolde finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, but a person. And she was his, as he was hers, for all the centuries to come. If you made it this far, if you felt every twist and turn of Isolde and Kade's journey, then you know this is exactly the kind of story your heart needed. But here is the thing. I poured hours into crafting this for you. I stayed up thinking about every line, every emotion, every moment that would make you feel something real. And if this story touched you, if it made you believe in love and second chances and justice, then do not just walk away. Hit that subscribe button right now. Become part of our family, the fastest growing vampire love stories community on this platform. We are building something incredible here, and your support is what keeps these stories coming. Also, I need to know, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments because I love knowing that these stories are reaching hearts across the globe. And let me tell you something. If you love this story, if Isolde and Kade captured your heart, the next one will absolutely wreck you in the best way possible. It is even more emotionally twisted, more dramatic, more consuming than this. The image on your screen right now? Click it. Watch the next story. Because trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Your heart deserves another journey. So what are you waiting for? Click that video. Let the next story begin.